My name is Ava Williams, 30 years old. I was once a cybersecurity engineer for the FBI, believing data could protect people. Until the day an 11-year-old girl vanished, and weeks later, only her lifeless body was found. I discovered the alerts I had raised had been ignored. If I had fought harder, she might have lived. That failure haunted me, driving me to leave the bureau and become a private investigator. One case, I traced a chain of anonymous transactions straight back to Malik, my former partner. Encrypted records revealed he had erased logs, concealing the identity of someone tied to the girl's disappearance. When I confronted him, the truth surfaced. Malik had betrayed me, not for money, but because a billionaire held secrets that could destroy him. That was when I realized manipulators don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes, they wear the familiar face you once trusted without question. But this time is different. I have proof, and I am no longer the prey. I am the hunter, and they will pay. I used to believe there was such a thing as digital safety. That was before I saw how easily a life could vanish inside the endless corridors of data. My name is Anya Sharma. 30 years old, a private investigator, and not the kind you see lurking in cheap motels with a flask in one hand and a cigarette in the other. My battlefield is the invisible one. The kind made of encrypted tunnels, anonymized accounts, shadow marketplaces, and lines of code so twisted they can make your head spin. Before I walked this path alone, I worked as a cybersecurity engineer for the FBI. I was good, maybe too good, but all that brilliance never stopped me from failing at the one case that still haunts me. It was a girl, 11 years old. She disappeared after someone lured her through an online chat forum. I traced the IPs, I broke through walls of data, but every time I thought I was close, the trail slipped away like smoke. Weeks later, they found her body 2 states away. I never forgot the mother's face when we told her. That was the day I understood what real failure tasted like. Since then, I have been trying to balance the scale in my own way. Not for the government, not for the headlines, but for myself. I live in New York now. A city that never sleeps, not because of its lights and traffic, but because the hum of servers never quiets down. Above the ground, you see neon and skyscrapers. Below it, entire worlds are running on stolen identities, blackmail schemes, and deepfakes, so convincing they can ruin lives in seconds. People call me when they are desperate, when someone is stalking them online or siphoning money out of their accounts, or when a digital ghost has entered their lives and refuses to leave. I charge enough to pay the rent on my cramped apartment and to keep the old servers humming in my office, nothing more. Malik Johnson is probably the only person who still checks in on me without needing a favor. He was my partner back in the bureau, sharp eyes, sharper tongue. Now he works as an investigative journalist, chasing down the kind of stories that keep senators awake at night. Every couple of weeks he drops by my office, carrying takeout and questions I do not always feel like answering. That morning, he leaned against my desk holding a container of lo mein. "Do you even eat food that doesn't come in cardboard anymore?" he asked, smirking. "I eat when I remember to," I replied, sifting through lines of code scrolling across my screen. "Still punishing yourself for the past," he said, less joking this time. "Still poking into things that aren't your business," I shot back, though I could not hide the faint smile tugging at my lips. Then there was Rosa, my landlord. A tough Puerto Rican woman in her 60s who treated me like a stray cat she had reluctantly decided to feed. She would knock on my door every Friday with a plate of arroz con pollo, pretending it was just leftovers, but I knew she was making it on purpose. "You are too skinny, Nina," she would say, wagging her finger. "I am 30, not 13, Rosa," I would laugh. "And you still forget to eat, take it." These little interactions grounded me, kept me tethered to a reality that was easy to lose in the endless hum of data. But underneath, the shadow of that little girl's case still pressed against my chest. I was always waiting for the next call, the one that might finally let me rewrite the ending of that story. The call came on a rainy Tuesday. My phone lit up with an unknown number. I almost ignored it until instinct told me otherwise. "Miss Sharma," a smooth male voice said. "My employer would like to meet with you, today." "Your employer have a name?" I asked. "Richard Kane. Perhaps you have heard of him." Richard Kane, billionaire tech mogul. His face was on every magazine cover in the last decade. A genius who built a digital empire out of algorithms that could predict consumer behavior with terrifying accuracy. Some called him a visionary. Others whispered that he had more skeletons in his servers than in any closet. "I am not in the habit of making house calls for billionaires," I said flatly. "This is not a request," the voice answered. "It is an opportunity. A car will pick you up at 6. He hung up before I could refuse. I sat there staring at the phone. Something in me knew this was the beginning of something dangerous. And yet, a part of me also knew I would go. Maybe it was the challenge, maybe it was the ghost of that girl I could not save, pushing me to take on a fight that mattered. At 6 sharp, a black sedan pulled up outside my building. The driver said nothing as I slid into the back seat. The city lights blurred past as we drove uptown to a glass tower that looked like it had been pulled straight out of a science fiction film. Security at the entrance was tighter than any federal facility I had ever seen. Biometric scanners, facial recognition, even thermal mapping. They led me into a private elevator and up to the top floor. Richard Kane's office looked more like a cathedral to technology than a workspace. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glittering skyline. Screens lined the walls displaying streams of data, stock tickers, security feeds, social media chatter in multiple languages. In the middle of it all sat the man himself, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my yearly rent. "Miss Sharma," he greeted me with a practiced smile. "Thank you for coming." I didn't have much of a choice, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There's always a choice. You chose curiosity. His eyes were sharp, calculating, the kind of eyes that measure value in everything they see. He gestured for me to sit. Standing nearby was another man, younger Asian American, with an expression as cold as the chrome desk. "This is Daniel Cho, my chief of staff. He handles details." Daniel nodded once, no smile, no handshake. "So what is this about?" I asked. "My daughter," Richard said simply. "Amelia, she has been taken." The way he said it was clinical, like reporting a lost shipment rather than a missing child. But I leaned in, interested despite myself. "Taken how?" "There are videos circulating on the dark web, disturbing images, ransom notes demanding access to certain technologies of mine. I cannot involve the police. I need discretion. I need results." "And you think I can succeed where your army of private security cannot?" I asked. "I think you understand the shadows better than most. You know how predators move, how they hide, and you have no loyalty to anyone but yourself. That makes you useful." There was a sting in his words, but he was not wrong. I did not work for governments or corporations. I worked for the truth wherever it led. "What makes you think your daughter is still alive?" I pressed. His jaw tightened just slightly. "Because they need her, and because I will pay any price to get her back." Daniel handed me a tablet. On it were links to encrypted files, screenshots from darknet forums, and still images of Amelia. A pretty brunette in her early 20s, eyes bright with intelligence. Seeing her face stirred something in me. I thought of that little girl I had lost. "If I take this job, I work alone," I said firmly. "No surveillance, no interference from your people." "You will have whatever you require," Richard agreed. "But remember this, I do not tolerate failure." I stood, pocketing the tablet. Neither do I, as I left the glass tower that night the rain had stopped, but the city still glistened as though it had been washed clean. I knew better. Underneath, the dirt never goes away. Amelia Kane was out there somewhere. Whether she was a victim or something else entirely, I would find her. And maybe, just maybe, this time I would not fail. The tablet Kane handed me weighed more than it should, not in ounces but in implications. It was filled with fragments of someone's life, ripped from the safe spaces of social media, and twisted into something grotesque. Amelia Kane's face, staring back at me from deepfake videos posted on encrypted boards. Her voice distorted into demands that felt scripted. Ransom notes written in code that smelled more like theater than genuine desperation. Back at my apartment, I spread everything out like an autopsy. Screens lit the room in pale blue while rain outside tapped against the glass. My servers hummed as I fed them data, scraping metadata, pulling threads, testing for anomalies. Whoever made these videos knew what they were doing. Layers of false trails, onion-rooted traffic, timestamps that did not match any known zone. Yet in the middle of the noise, I felt a pattern, like faint footprints on wet concrete. Malik called just as I was sinking into the abyss of data. "You sound like hell," he said the moment I picked up. "You always know how to sweet-talk a girl," I answered. "You working a case? Maybe, the kind that comes wrapped in billion-dollar arrogance." There was silence on his end. Then he said softly, "Be careful, Anya. Guys like Kane don't play games, they write the rules." I wanted to tell him he was overreacting, that I could handle myself, but a part of me knew he was right. Richard Kane was not just a rich man, he was infrastructure. When someone like that hires you, you are not hired. You are consumed. The first thing I noticed about the ransom messages was the phrasing. They demanded access to Kane's predictive algorithms, the ones that could anticipate consumer behavior and financial swings. Not money, not publicity. Technology. That set off alarms in my head. Kidnappers want quick payoffs, not corporate secrets. Unless the kidnappers were not kidnappers at all. I decided to reach out to someone who owed me a favor. Her name was Yuki Tanaka, a brilliant AI researcher in Tokyo who had once shared her lab's data with me to crack a trafficking case. We had met years ago at a cybersecurity summit, two women in a field dominated by men, instantly recognizing each other as survivors of the same quiet war. "Anya," she said when her face appeared on my encrypted video call. "It has been a long time." "Too long," I admitted. "I need your eyes on something." I sent her clips of the so-called ransom videos. She studied them, her brow furrowing. "These are sophisticated," she said finally. "Not amateur work. Whoever made them has access to deep generative models I have only seen in research labs. Look at the eyelid movement here, the micro-expressions. 99% accurate. But this frame..." She froze the screen and zoomed in. "See the light reflection. It is inconsistent with the environment. It is a fake." So Amelia might not even be in these videos. She might have made them herself, or someone is trying very hard to make you chase shadows. Her words sat heavy. If Amelia was staging her own disappearance, then everything about this case was upside down. Later that night, I heard a knock at my door. Rosa stood there with her usual plate of food, eyes sharp. "You working too hard again, Nina," she scolded. "Always," I admitted. She set the plate on my desk and looked at the screens full of Amelia's face. "She is pretty. Who is she?" "Someone who might not want to be found," I said quietly. Rosa shook her head. "Everyone wants to be found. Sometimes they just do not know it." After she left, I chewed on her words. I thought about Amelia, the daughter of a man who built empires on data. Did she vanish because she was taken, or because she wanted to escape the shadow of her father's empire? The next day, Kane summoned me again. Same car, same silence, same glass tower scraping the clouds. This time he looked more frayed, his tie loosened, his eyes lined with sleeplessness. Daniel Cho hovered nearby, silent as always. "Progress?" Kane asked without preamble. "I found inconsistencies in the videos. They may not be authentic." Meaning your daughter might not have been kidnapped at all. She might have staged this." His jaw tightened. For the first time, I saw a crack in his polished armor. "Impossible. Amelia is brilliant, but she is also reckless. She does not understand the dangers she is in. Find her." "You are not telling me everything," I pressed. "You are not paid to interrogate me," he snapped. Daniel stepped forward slightly, his presence like a shadow stretching across the room. I held my ground. "If you want results, you need to trust me," I said evenly. Kane exhaled slowly, regaining his mask. "Trust is earned. Deliver proof and you will have it." As I left, I caught Daniel's eyes. Cold, assessing. He was not just a staffer. He was a handler, a watchdog, and he did not like me sniffing around. Back at my office, I dug deeper into Amelia's digital footprint. She had been active in forums that critiqued government surveillance, corporate manipulation, and the illusion of digital freedom. Under pseudonyms, she debated fiercely about dismantling the structures that people like her father profited from. The more I read, the more I saw a mind searching for liberation. Malik stopped by that evening with coffee. "Your eyes look like they have not seen sleep in days," he said. "I found her trail," I murmured. "Good news then." "Not exactly. She is not a victim. She is a believer. She joined something bigger." He whistled low. "So the princess does not want saving. More like she wants to burn the castle down." We sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee, listening to the hum of servers. I felt the lines of my life shifting again. The girl who haunted me all these years had been helpless. Amelia Kane was anything but. And yet, danger clung to her path, not just from her father's empire, but from the world she had thrown herself into. Movements like hers burned hot and fast. They consumed their brightest stars. If I was going to find her, I needed to step into that fire without being swallowed whole. When I finally shut down the screens and stretched my aching shoulders, dawn was already breaking over New York. Another day in the city that never sleeps. Another day closer to a truth that might cost me everything. New York has 1,000 faces. Most people only see the one on postcards, the glowing skyline, the yellow cabs, the theater lights. But beneath the neon is a different city, stitched together by fiber optic veins carrying the darkest trades of humanity. That is where I had to go next. The Shade was not a place. It was a network. A community of hackers, anarchists, digital mercenaries who thrived in shadows. I had heard about them during my years with the Bureau, but never had cause to step inside. Until now. If Amelia Kane had staged her own disappearance, the Shade was where she would have found sanctuary. Getting in was not simple. It required more than just an invitation. You had to prove you belonged. That meant bypassing layers of encryption, surviving stress tests designed to flush out undercover agents, and offering something of value. I spent 48 hours building a backdoor into one of their side channels, slipping through like a ghost. When I finally logged into their primary forum, I felt like I had entered a cathedral built out of code. Neon-colored avatars pulsed across the screen, conversations threaded with inside jokes and cryptic challenges. Some debated philosophy, some shared exploits, others sold stolen data like candy. My cover was thin, but I knew how to talk the language. That was when she found me. "You don't belong here." The message popped up private. The sender's name was Kira Lowe. I typed back, "Neither do you, apparently. You just made it your home." Seconds later, a video chat request appeared. Against my better judgment, I accepted. The face that appeared was a young woman, maybe 20, Latina, with cropped hair dyed streaks of green. She wore oversized headphones around her neck and eyes that sparkled with mischief. "You are good," she said, smirking. "Most feds get burned before they even get this far." "I am not a fed," I replied calmly. "Sure, and I am not sitting here in a basement surrounded by empty pizza boxes." She leaned closer to the camera. "You smell like bureau training. Clean syntax, too disciplined." "Who the hell are you really?" I hesitated only a beat. "A detective. I am looking for someone." Her laughter rang sharp. "Everyone here is looking for someone. A mark, a target, a ghost. Who is yours, Amelia Kane?" Her smile froze just a fraction, then she leaned back. "That name is dangerous." "Then you know where she is," I pressed. "You think I am going to hand her to you because you asked nicely," she mocked. "Listen, lady, trust is a currency here. You want information, you earn it." And so began a strange alliance. Kira Lopez, street smart hacker with too much attitude for her own good. She tested me constantly, demanding proofs of skill, sending me on digital errands that could have blown my cover if I stumbled. But I never stumbled. And slowly she began to respect me, if only grudgingly. One night, after hours of breaking into a corporate data vault just for fun, she finally said, "You are not like the others. You do not chase clout. You chase truth." Why? I looked at her through the glow of my screen. Because once I failed, and I cannot afford to fail again. She did not press further. But the next day she sent me a file. It contained traces of Amelia. "This is as far as I go," she warned. "You push deeper and you will not like what you find." The file showed that Amelia had been in contact with a subgroup inside the Shade. Not just hackers, but activists. They called themselves the Nulls. Their mission was to dismantle systems of control. Surveillance grids, financial institutions, anything that smelled of corruption. To them, Amelia was not a runaway heiress. She was a symbol. I reached out again to Yuki in Tokyo, showing her the code Amelia had been writing. She whistled low. "This is not just rebellion. This is advanced cryptography married with predictive modeling. If unleashed, it could crash markets." Which meant Kane was not simply worried about his daughter's safety. He was worried about his empire. I decided to meet Kira in person. She suggested a bar in Brooklyn that doubled as a hacker hangout. Dark lights, louder music, a crowd that looked like they could build bombs out of laptops. She spotted me immediately, waving with that cocky grin. "You actually showed up. Brave or stupid," she teased. "Both," I said, sliding into the booth. She nursed a beer, watching me. "So what is the real deal with you and Amelia Kane? Her father hired me, but I think she might be right about him." "Careful," Kira warned. "Talking against Kane in the wrong places will get you buried." I leaned forward. "Do you know where she is?" Her grin faded. "Maybe, but if I tell you, you drag her back to her gilded cage. I am not playing that game. I am not here to drag her anywhere. I want the truth. If she is fighting something worth fighting, I need to see it myself." Kira studied me for a long time. Finally, she said, "There is a meet, 2 nights from now. The Nulls, I can get you in, but you keep your mouth shut and your eyes open." 2 nights later, I found myself in an abandoned warehouse in Queens, servers stacked like makeshift altars, screens flickering with coded manifestos. Dozens of people moved through the shadows, faces hidden by masks or digital projections. And there, at the center, was Amelia Kane. She looked different than in the photos. Fiercer. Her eyes blazed with conviction. She was not a damsel in distress. She was a leader. When she spoke, her voice carried through the room. "We are the ones they cannot control. They build systems to predict us, to confine us. We will break those systems. We will show the world that power does not belong to the few but to all of us." The crowd roared. My chest tightened. I had spent my life fighting predators in shadows. Now I was staring at someone who chose to step into the shadows willingly. After the gathering, Kira pulled me aside. "You saw her. Now you know. Still think she needs saving?" I had no answer. because in that moment I was not sure anymore. The warehouse in Queens stayed with me long after I left. Amelia's face, the conviction in her eyes, the roar of that crowd. She wasn't a missing daughter anymore. She was a firebrand, a revolutionary, someone who believed she could bend the digital world to her will. But I also knew what happens to firebrands. They burn bright until someone snuffs them out. Back in my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something bigger than I had ever faced. The Nulls weren't just hackers, they were an ideology, and ideologies had a way of swallowing people whole. Kira showed up at my place the next night unannounced. She leaned against the doorway with a smirk. "You don't keep good locks for someone who claims to be paranoid," she said. "I knew it was you," I replied, even though my pulse had jumped when I heard the door click. She strolled in, tossing her jacket on a chair. "You look like you had questions, so here I am. Ask." I studied her. She was young, reckless, sharp as broken glass, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of loyalty, maybe even hope. "Tell me about the shade's other side," I said. Her grin faltered. "What do you mean? You're anarchists, sure, but someone in your circles is running more than manifestos. I've seen the traces, deepfake markets, identity laundering, human trafficking hidden under layers of tech." For the first time, Kira's playful mask cracked. She sat down, rubbing the back of her neck. "Yeah. That's the part nobody likes to talk about. The shade is a big tent. Some of us fight the system. Others just feed off it. There are groups selling people like software updates. They use deepfakes to disguise them, reroute biometrics, create synthetic identities so they can move across borders without ever showing their real faces." The words twisted my stomach. I thought of that little girl years ago, the one I hadn't saved. Now I saw the machinery that had consumed her magnified 100 times. "Where does Amelia fit in with this?" I asked quietly. Kira hesitated. "She doesn't touch that side. She hates it. She thinks her father's empire fuels it, though. She says the same algorithms he uses to predict markets are being repurposed to predict human vulnerability, to pick targets, exploitable ones." I leaned back, feeling the weight of it. Amelia wasn't just rebelling. She was drawing a line in the sand, trying to expose the rot. But walking that line meant standing in the middle of wolves. Later that week, Malik cornered me at a diner we sometimes used as neutral ground. He slid into the booth across from me, eyes sharp. "You've been quiet, too quiet. Spill." I sipped my coffee, buying time. "I found her, Amelia. She's not kidnapped. She's with a movement." Malik cursed under his breath. "And I'm guessing Daddy Kane doesn't know that." "No, and he doesn't want to know. All he wants is his precious tech back." Malik leaned forward. "So what's your play?" "I don't know yet. If I expose her, she's finished. If I protect her, I go up against Kane. Either way, I lose." He studied me for a long time. "You've always chased ghosts, Anya. Maybe this time you finally caught one." That night, Kira invited me to a hidden server meet. Not in a warehouse this time, an abandoned subway station deep under the city. We got in through a rusted service door, the smell of damp concrete hitting my nose. Down below, the station had been transformed. Old tracks lined with glowing cables, projectors painting walls with streams of code, makeshift terminals buzzing with stolen electricity. The people there weren't kids playing at Rebellion. They were hardened. Some wore masks, others didn't bother. I recognized faces from FBI watch lists, hackers responsible for multi-million-dollar breaches, activists hunted across continents. And in the center of it all, a massive screen played a horrifying reel. It showed people, real people, men, women, children, but their faces were constantly shifting, flickering through synthetic overlays, deepfakes masking their identities. They were being auctioned like digital avatars. The crowd gasped, whispered, some cheered. "This is the marketplace," Kira whispered beside me. "They call it the carousel. Every identity spins until you don't know who you're looking at anymore. That's how they move them. That's how they hide them." My stomach churned. I wanted to smash the screen, to shut it down, but I knew better. This wasn't the kind of fight you win by screaming. You win it by gathering evidence, by pulling threads until the whole thing collapses. Then I saw something that froze me cold. One of the avatars flickered just enough to show Amelia's face. For less than a second, but I knew it was her. "Did you see that?" I hissed. Kira's eyes widened. "No way, that shouldn't be possible." She'd never, but the image was gone, replaced by another synthetic mask. My pulse hammered in my ears. Was Amelia infiltrating the carousel to expose it, or had someone dragged her into it against her? Well, after the meet, I cornered Kira. "Tell me the truth. Is Amelia involved in that trafficking ring?" Kira shook her head violently. "No. She's trying to burn it down. She believes her father's algorithms are part of the engine that powers it." She thinks if she hijacks the tech, she can bring the whole carousel crashing. I paced the empty platform, anger and fear warring in my chest. She's playing with fire. These people don't forgive mistakes. She knows that, but she thinks it's worth it. I stared at the graffiti-covered walls, feeling the weight of every choice pressing in. Amelia was not just another missing girl. She was a catalyst, and if I didn't move carefully, the explosion she was building would swallow us all. Later, alone in my apartment, I replayed the footage over and over. The faces, the voices, the endless cycle of exploitation hidden beneath layers of code. I thought about Cain, about his empire built on prediction. Maybe he really didn't care about his daughter. Maybe all he cared about was plugging the hole before the world saw what he had been feeding. And me, I was caught in the middle. Between a father who wanted control, a daughter who wanted revolution, and a machine that chewed up human lives like data packets. I closed my eyes and whispered to the silence, "Not this time. I won't fail this time." I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept looping back to Amelia's face flickering on the carousel feed. Was it a glitch, a warning, a sign she was closer to the darkness than Kira wanted me to believe? By dawn, I had made up my mind. I needed to hear it from Amelia herself. No more chasing shadows. Kira got me access to a secure line, an encrypted tunnel buried under layers of proxies. She told me Amelia checked in through it once a week. She doesn't trust many people, but if I vouch for you, maybe she'll bite, Kira said. So I waited, fingers tapping the keys, heart pounding harder than I cared to admit. Then the screen lit up with static before clearing to reveal her, Amelia Cain. She was sitting in a dim room, light from multiple monitors painting her face in cold blues and greens. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, eyes sharp but tired. She looked nothing like the missing daughter plastered across tabloids. She looked like someone who had walked through fire and decided to stay in the flames. "So you're the detective Daddy hired," she said flatly. "Not exactly how I'd introduce myself," I replied. Her lips twitched at the corner. "You tracked me here. That's impressive. Or stupid." I leaned closer. "You need to know what I saw, your face, on the carousel feed." Her expression didn't change. "Good, that means it worked." My stomach dropped. "Worked? You did that on purpose," she nodded calmly. "I seeded myself into the carousel, not as a victim, as a virus. Every time my face cycles, I inject code, worms, payloads, disruptions. I'm poisoning the machine from the inside." I sat back, staring at her. "You weren't kidnapped. You're not a prisoner." Her voice hardened. "I chose this. My father's world is built on exploitation. His algorithms don't just predict markets. They predict vulnerabilities. They calculate who can be bought, who can be broken, who disappears without making a sound. The carousel is just the inevitable spawn of his empire, and I won't stand by while he feeds it." I thought of Cain's cold eyes, the way he never once asked about her safety, only his stolen code. The pieces began to fit together in ways I didn't want them to. "So you're using his tech against him," I said. "Against him? Against every system like his. Do you know what it feels like to be invisible to your own father, an asset, not a daughter?" Her voice cracked just enough for me to catch it before she pulled herself back together. "I'm not running," she continued. "I'm fighting, and I don't need saving." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of her servers in the background. Finally, I said quietly, "You're going to paint a target on your back so large the whole world will see it. Then let them look. Maybe they'll finally see what he is." The connection cut before I could answer. I sat there in the glow of my screen, heart hammering. She wasn't missing. She was weaponizing herself. And Cain had sent me to retrieve stolen property, not a daughter. Malik didn't take it well when I told him. He slammed his palm against the table, rattling our cups. "You're telling me she volunteered for this circus? She's not some lost kid. She's a damn cyber terrorist now." "She's not a terrorist," I snapped. "She's trying to expose the truth." Malik shook his head. "Anya, wake up. You're letting your guilt talk. You see her as some redemption project for the kid you lost years ago. But she's not that kid. She's a grown woman making choices that put her on every watch list in the country." I wanted to argue. Instead, I just stared into my coffee, tasting the bitterness spread across my tongue. Later that day, Cain summoned me to his penthouse again. He paced in front of the glass wall, the city sprawling beneath him like a circuit board. "You've been quiet, Miss Sharma. I don't pay for silence." I held his gaze. "Your daughter isn't kidnapped. She's with them by choice." His face barely moved, just a tightening around the jaw. "Explain." "She believes you're complicit in the carousel. She says your algorithms are being weaponized to predict and exploit vulnerable people. She thinks the only way to stop it is to use your own tools against you." Cain's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Children and their fantasies. You of all people should know movements built on rage collapse under their own weight. His calm unnerved me more than any outburst could have. Do you even care about her? I asked before I could stop myself. His eyes turned to ice. What I care about is control. My daughter has stolen technology that belongs to me. That technology in the wrong hands can destabilize markets, governments, entire nations. If you think this is about family, you're in the wrong line of work. There it was, the truth laid bare. He didn't want her back. He wanted his crown jewel restored. When I left his building that night, I felt dirty. Like I had shaken hands with a devil wrapped in Armani. Kira called me as I walked down Fifth Avenue. You talked to her, didn't you? She said. Yes, and now you know. I know she's playing with fire, and I know Kane only cares about the matches, Kira sighed. Then you also know you have to pick a side. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, the city swirling around me in a blur of headlights and voices. She was right. I was standing on a fault line and the quake was coming. That night I pulled out an old photo from my desk drawer, the girl I had failed, the one who never came home. I stared at her smile until my vision blurred. I whispered to her memory, maybe this time I can make it right. But deep down, I knew right and wrong weren't as simple as they used to be. Not in this world. Not when the lines were drawn in code and blood. The city felt heavier after that meeting with Kane. Every corner I turned, every screen I passed, I wondered how many belonged to him. How many invisible threads tied me to his empire without my consent. I tried to bury myself in routine. Case notes, data analysis, late-night coding to drown out the noise, but nothing quieted the storm. Not when every message from Kira pulled me deeper into the shade's labyrinth, and every call from Kane's people reminded me they were watching. The first betrayal came from a place I didn't expect. Malik. He met me at our usual diner, but something was off. He was too stiff, too careful, like a man rehearsing a part. He stirred his coffee 3 times before looking at me. You need to step away from this, Anya. Walk before it eats you alive. I frowned. Since when do you tell me to quit? He leaned closer, lowering his voice. You're in over your head. Kane's not someone you can play chicken with, and Amelia isn't some damsel waiting for a hero. She's a liability. I narrowed my eyes. This isn't you talking. Who got to you? He flinched just slightly, and that was enough. My pulse spiked. Kane's got you on his payroll, doesn't he? I hissed. Malik didn't deny it. His silence was louder than any confession. I shoved back from the booth, anger burning through me. You sold me out. I'm trying to keep you alive, he snapped. You think Kane won't crush you if you pick her side? You're nothing to him, just another disposable asset. I left him sitting there, his hands wrapped tight around his mug, and swore I'd never let Kane pull my strings the way he had pulled Malik's. But that didn't mean Kane wasn't watching. That night my apartment lit up with surveillance. I spotted the tiny glint of a pinhole cam in the smoke detector, the faint whir of a micro-drone outside my window. He was tightening the net. I called Kira through a burner. He's inside my walls. Every move I make, he's recording. Kira cursed under her breath. Then it's time to move. There's a safe house in Brooklyn. Old server farm turned hideout. You'll be off his grid there. I grabbed what I could carry and disappeared into the night. The safe house looked like nothing from the outside. Just a boarded-up building with graffiti scars. But inside, rows of gutted server racks had been converted into bunks, storage, a command hub for the shade. The air hummed with recycled fans and tension. Amelia was there. She didn't look surprised to see me, just tired. So Daddy's turning up the heat, she said. I dropped my bag on the floor. He's not just turning it up. He's trying to cook me alive. He's got Malik feeding him updates. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't comment. Instead, she motioned me toward a workstation. Screens bloomed with streams of code, maps, live feeds of dark web auctions. This is what we're fighting. Every day new faces. New lives stripped, rewritten, erased. And every algorithm tracing them back leads to the same fingerprints, my father's. I studied the data. She wasn't lying. The predictive patterns matched Kane's systems perfectly. Every model built to predict stock market volatility had been repurposed to predict human desperation. I turned to her. You're not just rebelling, you're right, he is complicit. She nodded once, eyes burning. Now you understand. For the next few days, I worked alongside her. We dug through terabytes of stolen data, traced financial flows through shell companies and encrypted wallets. Every thread we pulled pointed back to Kane's empire. Offshore accounts, government contracts, quiet payoffs to agencies willing to look away. It was intoxicating and horrifying at once. Late one night, while the others slept, I caught Amelia staring at a photo taped above her workstation. It was her as a child, maybe 8 years old, sitting on her father's lap, both of them smiling, a picture-perfect lie. You kept that? I asked softly. Her eyes flicked to me, then back to the photo. I keep it to remind myself that love was never real. It was a performance like everything he does. I wanted to reach out, to offer something more than shared rage. But I knew the walls she had built were stronger than anything I could tear down in a night. On the fourth day, Kane made his move. The safe house's alarms screamed, screens flashing red, network breach, physical breach, he had found us. Kira sprinted into the room, breathless. Drones incoming, full squad. Amelia's fingers flew across her keyboard. I can stall them, trigger false geolocations, scramble their feeds. I grabbed her arm. That'll only buy us minutes. Kira tossed me a weapon. Not my style, but I didn't argue. The next 20 minutes were chaos. Drones swarming like hornets, their whirring blades slicing the air. Shade members scattering, shouting, firing back. Sparks rained from shattered servers. Through the smoke and noise, Amelia stood her ground, coding faster than I thought humanly possible, launching countermeasures that fried drone after drone. She wasn't just fighting with ideology. She was fighting with firepower coded into every line of her father's stolen algorithms. When it was over, the safe house was in ruins, but we were still standing. Barely, Amelia leaned against a rack, sweat streaming down her face. He won't stop, she said. He'll burn every block in the city if it means crushing us. I met her eyes, chest still heaving. Then we take the fight to him. And for the first time, I saw it. Not just the fury, not just the rebellion, but the faintest flicker of belief that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. After the smoke cleared at the Brooklyn safe house, none of us could pretend anymore. Kane wasn't just circling, he was hunting. He would torch the whole city if it meant dragging Amelia out. And if I was standing next to her, he'd burn me too. We moved underground. Literally. Kira led us through forgotten maintenance tunnels that smelled like rust and stale air. For 2 nights, we lived like fugitives, carrying what equipment we could salvage. It wasn't glamorous, but it was off his grid. Still, paranoia followed me. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I could hear drones buzzing, cameras blinking. I had spent years dismantling surveillance networks for the FBI, but Kane's reach was deeper than anything I'd seen. He didn't need warrants. He didn't need oversight. He had money, and in America money was law. Amelia never stopped working. Even underground, she kept hammering at the carousel. Her face flashed across screens like a beacon, her code slipping into veins of the network. She was playing a game of chicken with a machine designed to devour her. One night, when exhaustion finally pulled her away from the keyboard, I found her asleep on a makeshift cot. The photo of her as a child was tucked under her hand, like a talisman. For the first time, I saw not the rebel leader, not the virus in the system, but just a young woman trying to rewrite a story that had been forced on her. And maybe that's why the dream hit me so hard. In the dream, I was back in that motel room years ago, the one with the girl I couldn't save. I smelled the mildew, felt the sticky carpet under my knees, heard the muffled cries through the door. I was too slow then, too late. I kicked the door open and she was gone, just an empty chair and a screen looping deepfake faces over and over until I couldn't tell which one was hers anymore. I woke up with sweat running down my spine and the weight of failure pressing against my chest. I whispered into the dark, not again, not this time. The next day, Amelia called me over to her workstation. I cracked a node, look at this. On the screen was a flow of encrypted traffic routed through government servers, not just random agencies either. Homeland Security, defense contracts, even a few FBI nodes. My throat went dry. He's not just complicit, he's partnered. She nodded grimly. The carousel doesn't survive without protection. He sells them data, predictive models, tools to disappear inconvenient people. They let him run his shadow markets in return. The betrayal stung deeper because I had once worn that badge. I had believed in the Bureau, believed that protecting the system meant protecting people. Now I saw the system had been feeding the monster all along. I whispered, how many girls, how many kids disappeared through this pipeline because of men shaking Kane's hand? Amelia's eyes softened just for a second. Too many, that's why we burn it down. That night we started building a plan, not just to leak data, to weaponize it, to expose Kane and his partners so publicly the government couldn't bury it. Amelia called it a digital daylight bomb. A timed release of documents, recordings, financial trails. Evidence so undeniable it would blind the world into finally seeing. Kira was ecstatic. You drop this, we're not just a fringe movement anymore, we're a revolution. But I felt the weight in my gut. Revolutions eat their own, don't forget that. 2 days later, Malik showed up again. He found me leaving one of the tunnels, blocking my path with that same look I used to trust. Anya, please, just listen. I crossed my arms. Why should I trust a man who sold me out? His shoulders sagged. I screwed up. Kane leaned on me and I panicked, but I didn't tell him everything. I kept your trail clouded as much as I could, and now I want to make it right. I studied him, searching for lies. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaking. He looked more broken than dangerous. What do you want? I asked. To help. I can get you access to Kane's private servers. He keeps backups, redundancies. If you really want to take him down, you'll need those. Every instinct screamed trap. But if he was telling the truth, it was the kind of crack we couldn't ignore. I told Amelia. She didn't trust him either. But after a long silence, she said, sometimes you gamble with poison if it kills the bigger monster. So we prepared. The op was insane. Breaking into Kane's network was like storming a fortress made of firewalls and machine learning sentries. Amelia worked code like a maestro, her fingers a blur. Kira ran interference, feeding disinformation through back channels. Malik provided credentials only an insider could know. And me, I monitored, patching holes, making sure the whole system didn't swallow us. Hours stretched like years. Then finally Amelia leaned back, a wild grin on her face. We're in. On the screen opened terabytes of data. Contracts, shell accounts, private correspondences, and videos, dozens of them, test runs of deepfake identities. Synthetic faces laughing, crying, screaming. Some of them stitched over real bodies strapped to chairs. My stomach flipped. Amelia's hands trembled as she whispered, this is it, this is the core. We copied everything. Compressed, encrypted, scattered across dead drops. The daylight bomb was real now. It ticked quietly in our hands, waiting to go off. But Kane must have felt the breach. Within minutes, alarms blared, networks tightening like a noose. We have to cut out, I shouted. Amelia hesitated, eyes locked on one last folder labeled simply daughter. I yanked her back. No time, move. We ran. Back in the tunnels, adrenaline still pounding, Amelia confronted me. You dragged me away from something. That folder could have been a trap, or worse, you're alive because I pulled you out. She glared, fury sparking in her eyes. Don't make choices for me, you're not my savior. I'm not trying to be, I'm trying to keep you breathing long enough to finish this. The silence stretched, broken only by dripping pipes. Then she exhaled, her shoulders dropping. Fine, but next time I decide. I nodded. Next time? That night, as we hid deep underground with Kane's stolen secrets burning holes in our drives, I realized the war had shifted. This wasn't just his empire against Amelia's rebellion. It was personal, father against daughter. And me, caught in between, trying to balance justice on a blade that cut both ways. I didn't sleep that night. The city hummed outside my window, neon reflections bouncing off the walls like broken code. Everything had changed. Kane's empire was vulnerable, and for the first time I could feel the weight of the fight actually tipping in our favor. Amelia's drive sat on my desk, small but lethal. It contained every hidden payment, every shadow contract, every trace of the corruption her father had built over decades. I could feel its power in my hand, the potential to ignite a chain reaction the world wouldn't ignore. She had been clear, disappear after this. No flash, no social media, no breadcrumbs. She didn't want thanks or recognition. She wanted freedom to operate in the shadows, to finish what she had started without interference. I opened the drive and began preparing the release. Carefully, methodically. Each piece of evidence had to hit in the right order so that Kane's spokespeople, his lawyers, and the public could not contain the narrative. Bank transfers first, then contracts tied to government agencies, finally the video evidence showing the trafficking networks and hidden deals. For 48 hours, I moved like a phantom. Emails, encrypted uploads, anonymous tips to reporters with zero trace leading back to me. Each headline ignited new panic. Boards convened. Stock prices plummeted. Corporate partners issued statements of shock. Kane's perfect world was collapsing piece by piece. The hardest part was watching him try to fight it. Press conferences, statements to the media, his public face calm and controlled, while behind the cameras I knew his systems were breaking, his allies turning on him and the law watching more closely than ever. I stayed in the background, erasing my fingerprints, leaving no trail that could be traced back to me. And yet I knew Kane knew. He always knew. Evidence of his wrath came quickly. A single envelope slipped under my door, no marks, no break-in. Just his precise handwriting. You chose the wrong side. This is not over. Families remember. I burned it in the sink. Fear prickled at the back of my neck, but it was accompanied by resolve. If he was threatening me, it meant he was losing. Later, I went to the train station where Amelia was supposed to meet a contact to disappear underground. She arrived quiet, hood low, backpack slung over her shoulder. No words, no goodbyes, just a glance that said everything and nothing. In that glance, I saw hope. She had survived, yes, but she had also grown into someone I could never fully control or predict. She had her fire, and she would use it however she chose. Maybe to burn corruption, maybe to inspire, maybe to ignite chaos. But she would survive. I didn't follow. Some stories, I realized, were meant to be left unfinished. I watched the train pull out, the city lights flickering past, and felt a strange calm. Back in my apartment, I sat at my desk, letting the silence settle. For years I had chased ghosts, fought shadows, and carried guilt like armor. Tonight I had exposed a monster, protected someone who deserved the truth, and walked away unscathed. Justice was messy, truth was jagged, but as long as there were people willing to risk themselves to pull it into the light, there was still hope. Sometimes hope was enough. I poured a glass of water, closed my laptop, and whispered to the quiet city, on to the next case. The days after the release were surreal. I moved through the city like a ghost, watching the world respond to the storm I had helped unleash. Headlines screamed about Kane's corruption, banks suspended accounts, investigations launched, board members resigned overnight. Law enforcement scrambled to contain what had suddenly become public knowledge, and I felt every bit of it in my bones. Every choice, every line of code, every lie I had dismantled, it was all real now. The fight wasn't abstract anymore. It had consequences, and I was standing in the middle of them. Malik called, his voice shaky. "You did it. You actually did it." I didn't answer immediately. "It's not over. He's powerful. He's angry. He will strike back." "I know," he said quietly. "But the world saw. People are talking. You gave them eyes." I wanted to believe him, but part of me knew that Kane wouldn't fade quietly. He had resources, influence, and a reputation for ruthlessness. And the truth was, he had nothing left to lose. Meanwhile, Amelia had vanished completely. Kira sent updates through secure channels, fragments of her operations underground. The movement was growing, expanding into international networks, exploiting gaps in systems designed to protect people and infrastructure. Her tactics were aggressive but not reckless. She had become a ghost in the machine, untouchable and dangerous. I watched from a distance, knowing I couldn't intervene, not without jeopardizing everything we had done. And yet I felt the pull of responsibility. Part of me wanted to reach out to make sure she was safe, to remind her that even rebels needed allies. But I didn't. Some lessons, I realized, had to be learned alone. At the office, I began piecing together the aftermath. Kane's empire had fractured, leaving a vacuum in the tech world and in criminal networks that had relied on his resources. Opportunists moved in, trying to claim territory, but Amelia had already disrupted the system so thoroughly that their attempts were chaotic, uncoordinated, and easily countered by the shade. Kira came to me one night, leaning against my doorframe, eyes tired but resolute. "You did more than expose him. You gave people a chance. Not just Amelia, not just the victims. Everyone, you opened doors that have been locked for decades." I shook my head. "I just followed the trail. The fire was already burning. I just made sure it didn't die in the shadows." She smiled faintly. "Sometimes following the trail is enough." I spent hours reflecting on everything, the cases I had failed, the mistakes I had made, the people I had lost. And yet, for the first time in years, I felt a sliver of peace. The girl I had failed to save so long ago wouldn't have disappeared into the system I had once sworn to protect. Amelia had become someone who could fight the darkness from within on her own terms. There were consequences, of course. Kane's allies were still looking for retribution, and my involvement could be traced if someone dug deep enough. I had to remain vigilant, ready to disappear at a moment's notice. But I accepted that risk. The truth mattered more than safety. One evening, I walked along the Hudson, the water reflecting the lights of the city like fragmented code. I thought about the choices I had made, the lines I had crossed, the ethical compromises I had endured. And I realized that justice wasn't about perfection. It was about taking the steps that mattered, even when the path was uncertain and dangerous. I whispered to the river, almost as if I were speaking to Amelia, "Keep your fire burning. Keep it focused. Don't let it consume you, but don't let it die." And in the quiet of that night, with the city alive and indifferent around me, I understood something profound. The world would never be perfect. Corruption, greed, exploitation, they would always exist, but people could still make a difference. People could still choose to act, to fight, to protect what was right. I didn't know where Amelia was or what battles she faced in the shadows, but I trusted her to survive, to learn, to grow. And I trusted myself to continue, to face the next case, the next challenge, with the same resolve. Some nights I still dream of the girl I couldn't save, the one whose voice haunted me through the years. But now, instead of guilt, I feel purpose. Instead of fear, I feel clarity. I pick up my laptop, opening a blank case file. The world is chaotic, dangerous, and often cruel. But I am ready, always ready. On to the next case, I murmur, closing the file and letting the hum of the city fill the silence. Hope is messy. Justice is messy. Truth is messy. But they are worth fighting for. And as long as people choose to stand, to act, to expose the darkness, there is light. The weeks after Kane's exposure were quieter, though no less intense. Headlines eventually cooled, investigations settled into slow, bureaucratic churn, and the tech world began picking up the pieces of what had been shattered. But for me, quiet didn't mean peace. It meant reflection, preparation, and vigilance. I spent mornings reviewing data, afternoons in meetings with journalists and analysts who needed anonymous tips, and nights in quiet observation of the shadows where Amelia moved. I never contacted her directly. That wasn't my role anymore. She had chosen the fire, I had chosen the watchtower. Kira checked in regularly. She was restless, always moving, always coordinating, always one step ahead. "She's making waves," Kira said one evening over an encrypted line. "The movement is growing faster than anyone predicted. She's turning your father's tools into shields for the innocent. Not perfect, not clean, but effective." I leaned back in my chair, watching the city lights flicker. "Good, that's what matters, as long as people are protected." "Do you ever think about her?" Kira asked quietly. "Every day," I admitted. "She reminds me of why I keep doing this. She reminds me that even in darkness, there's someone willing to risk everything for the truth." The world outside didn't change overnight. Corporations adapted, governments covered tracks, and corruption found new channels. But in the chaos, pockets of justice thrived. People began questioning, investigating, and taking action. And for the first time, I felt like my actions, my choices, had contributed to that ripple. One night I walked along the East River, the chill cutting through my jacket. I thought of Amelia's face as she boarded that train to disappear into the shadows. The brief glance we shared had carried more meaning than words ever could. She wasn't just my client or a rebel. She was a reminder of the power of choice, the courage to act against insurmountable odds. I thought about the girl I had failed long ago, the memory that had haunted me for years. And I realized that while I couldn't rewrite the past, I could honor it by acting in the present, by standing up for those who couldn't stand for themselves. In the coming months, whispers of the Shades operations began appearing in reports, but the identity of the leaders remained hidden. Amelia had become a ghost, an architect of change working unseen, disrupting systems, saving lives, and challenging the powerful. She had found her purpose, and I had found mine. I kept my apartment tidy, my routines disciplined, and my contacts minimal, yet I never felt alone. The work we had done, the risks we had taken, the lives we had protected, gave me a sense of fulfillment I had never known. One morning, reviewing financial data for an unrelated case, I found a small anomaly, a hidden ledger, a misaligned code segment, a system vulnerability. My pulse quickened, not because it was dangerous, but because it meant someone, somewhere, needed me again. I smiled, the first real smile in weeks, and whispered to the empty room, "Let's see what the world needs today." Justice wasn't perfect. Truth was never neat. But courage, integrity, and action created change, even when it was invisible or incomplete. I had learned to embrace the gray, to fight without guarantee of reward, and to believe that every choice mattered. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I imagined Amelia watching over the shadows, her fire burning safely, her mission unfolding as intended. I knew she would make mistakes, but she would learn, adapt, and continue, and I knew I had given her that chance. The sun rose over the skyline, scattering gold across steel and glass. I took a deep breath and felt the city awake around me. Somewhere out there, people were choosing courage. Somewhere, truth was being sought. Somewhere, change was happening. I picked up my laptop, opened a new case file, and let the hum of the city fill the room. "On to the next case," I said, with certainty and hope. Because the fight never ends. And as long as people choose to act, to protect, and to expose the darkness, light will always find a way.